consistency by throwing away Power Word Shield and things like that. And because of that kind of strategy in every single one of his decks, the Druid in particular from Pavel, but even to an extent the Priest and Rogue might struggle.
Yeah, it just gives that extra little push in the middle. The Spiteful Summoners will be discussed what you should do with them for the next 3 months. I don't think anyone's going to be completely certain for ages as to exactly how you build those. But what we do know is against Druid in particular, which takes forever, turn 6 making 2 big minions, Druid just doesn't like it.
I mean, I get the suspicion that Spiteful Summoner decks are not what you should be bringing to the tournament, but if Kranich wins and ever I say that, they'll just be like, well, Zixo won.
Yeah,
Kranich
Zixo
won. What are you talking about?
And then we all went, well, even Zixo, I think, was like, yeah, I don't think it'll work again.
Yeah,
and then
exactly.
Here's Kranich doing the same thing.
Yeah.
He's into the semi-finals and looking good in the semi-final as well, with Pavel drawing patches. Has he ever drawn patches before?
Has he ever drawn patches before? Is that what you're asking me about Pavel?
I don't think he has.
In his life?
Yeah.
Right.
I've never seen him draw it. But this is a
Don't
really
look at the
grim situation for him.
It is indeed.
One of the matchups he should be trying to, well, he's trying to win them all, but it's one that he's going to hope to be winning, getting early board.
Yeah, the Rogue is probably the easiest deck for him to take a win with. Maybe the Kazakus Priest. I'm not exactly sure, having not played against all too many Spiteful Summoner decks. But you know, with his starting hand, Backstab is obviously the card you want against this Murloc aggressive Paladin, but you need other cards to complement it. You need patches to be pulled from your deck to get that one extra damage.
You really do. You've got
not
to
be thrown onto the board. Yeah, you need SI7. Even saving this Backstab for the Elven Minstrel could maybe give him the mid-game pressure to push back onto the board, but he just has to be too afraid, not even of Rockpool Hunter, but just of being blown up on board.
Pavel proving a point, something you were talking about yesterday, actually, that he believes you should spend more turn on turns 1 and 2 than like any other turns in the game, because this is where you win or lose matches. There's a match earlier where 2 Paladins went off, and we were saying about the Murloc Paladin had the nuts draw, but had the aggro Paladin just gone all in on turn 1 with coin and wide, they'd have had a direwolf to be able to clear the board up.
Yeah.
And it just changes the whole game. Just one tiny looking mistake.
It's true. When I was casting Pavel recently in China, you'd have about as much time to say all your stuff on turn 1 as you had for the whole rest of the game, because he just spent the full 75 seconds on that, and then the rest of the game took about 30 seconds.
2-2 Van Cleef, challenging the board well enough. Why not?
So is he going to play?
This shows how challenging the board in the current meta is so absolutely key, more than ever in Hearthstone.
Man, even just going second here for Pavel, like usually it's really bad in these aggressive tempo matchups, but for the Rogue, it's just showing how good combo can be most of the time, but how truly awful combo can be when you don't hit it.
Yeah, this is a really strange game, and this is where the Spiteful Summoner is going to earn its money, because it's going to break this early trade-off stance, whereas a more aggro Paladin deck would be in a very similar position now, but it'd be running out of stuff trying to land a Divine Favor and just get back into it.
Yeah. And so now for Pavel, I mean, he can choose which 2-drop he wants to play in the Echoing Ooze, I suppose is what the Firefly simulates, and just the Bloodfen Raptor is what the Elven Minstrel simulates, because they both just have very unimpressive stats. But obviously the Firefly allows you to fit in the Dagger as well, maybe even saving back the Flame Elemental potentially to combo with the Elven Minstrel, but it's looking much more to me like Cobalt Scalebane will be the play next turn.
Yeah, get something fairly big on that board is going to be absolutely key. Again, not wasting any resources, attacking in with that dagger, using the health total and the dagger as a resource.
So he is saving it back here. It does allow a bit more flexibility in his hand.
And in his future hands.
Yes,
the point?
Yeah, that's the thing. Saving it for Vilespine, saving it for, I don't know, maybe Bone Marrow on turn 8. That's probably a bit too forward thinking, and it will have changed too much by then. But
yeah, the likely thing is he just wants to get some stuff that does something with a Minstrel. These Scalebanes, whilst they're beefy, they are only 5/5s, they're only 1 minion. He wants to go wider than that to challenge a potential scary board from Kranich. And he might be looking for a Vilespine right now, because if he gets a Spiteful Summoner in the face on turn 6, he might need an immediate Vilespine, so he might have to Flame Elemental into Minstrel and try and get an Activator and the Vilespine at once. But Finn just says nope.
Yeah, this is just a very easy Scalebane turn here. I was going to say on the previous turn I would have liked the Flame Elemental to give him a target for the Scalebane on the following turn, but any Murloc played there by Kranich would have given the attack buff to the Tidecaller necessary to clear the board. So all things considered, I can respect Pavel's line of play, because if he picks up another expensive card on the following turn like Bone Mail, saving this Flame Elemental will actually become pretty influential.
Here comes the fish.
And here comes the worm to fish the fish like bait.
That's where they came from, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. See that?
This is so nuts. Look at this is what came down in one turn on turn 5, and then he's probably going to summon a random 8-drop on the following turn, or just bloom and kill his opponent with Sunkeeper Tarot.
Well, there's a Vile Spine I said was so important. Look at how it's going to do nothing.
Yeah.
It's just not going to save any day at all.
Yeah, and this is just what happens when you fall behind on the early boards against Paladin, because Rogue, as ever, it has great single target removal with Vile Spine, Eviscerate in the old days, but it has terrible removal against wide boards. There's just not really much that can be done here for Pavel.
Yeah, and by not much, it's just grim. Not completely over, but then the next turn's going to happen. That's how turns work, you know, young man.
You have one, and then sometimes you get another one.
Yeah, I don't think Pavel's going to have many more, though.
I don't think he is indeed, especially now that the Vile Spine has come down. Kranich feels very free to throw it down. Does unfortunately hit the Call to Arms, which is obviously the downside of this deck, but still, this is not bad.
It's actually fine.
Yeah, I mean, it's not great. Like, you can't think of it as a 4-mana 6/6. It's way slower than that. And it's not getting in the damage for a couple of turns.
It's kind of grim now, but it's too slow to be spellbroked.
Neil, it's not kind of grim now. If he spellbreaks that, he is literally just dead.
He's literally just dead anyway.
Yeah, he can do nothing here. And so this is going to be game number 1 going to Kranich. Kind of unfortunate for Pavel. The Paladin sneaking a win, though.
Yeah.
What was that noise you just uttered?
That was me going, yeah. Nodding.
Right.
Smugly.
Gave me a heart attack.
But yeah, it's not going to go far. This Outdoor Peacekeeper has been talked about a lot. We haven't really had a chance to talk about it enough here, like on cast. Off cast, we've talked about it a fair amount. Do you have a conclusion as to this card's
Call to
main
Arms?
purpose? Yeah, no, the Peacekeeper.
Oh, sorry, the Peacekeeper. It makes sense because the reason we're thinking of that you put it in your deck at the moment is Corridor Creeper, because there's no real strong answer to that as an immediate response for Paladin. And so if that comes down turns 3 or 4 and you're not ahead on board, Aldor kind of acts as a pseudo Creeper of your own, because it cancels out with your opponent's one for a similar amount of mana.
I like the way that Pavel's thinking about his next turn. In which manner shall I press the bottom right?
I mean, he can get Swashbuckler into...
Yeah, keep going.
Nothing.
You've got 2 whole mana to spend.
I like his dedication, though, to truly waste everyone's time as much as possible.
He's advancing his rogue quest as far as he can by playing more cards. So, 1-0 in double quick time there for Kranich. And it's important that it's the Paladin, because we were saying that's the one that might struggle against the Druid. That's gone now. Maybe,
yeah. I mean, having looked at it more closely, if it was the straight-up aggro Druid, I think it might struggle more, because that deck can be really weak to play.
Yeah.
But this Murloc Paladin, it can often actually go pretty tall in terms of its attack. You have a lot of, very often, few high-attack minions if you can hit the Megasaur, or if you can hit the Creepers, in which case Plague really just will not get the job done, and you need something significantly more impressive.
Yeah, it's a decent situation to be in, where all 3 of your decks counter, like... I'm going to call it a tier 2 deck, but I don't think it's even tier 2, the Quest Druid. It's very... If it is, it's at the bottom of tier 2.
I think I could quite happily call it a tier 2 deck in the right meta. And the thing is, I can so see Pavel's reasoning for bringing the Quest Druid, but it just hasn't come into actuation here. It's the same for Firebat and Purple to an extent. They just kind of couldn't quite correctly call what the meta of this tournament was going to be.
Purple still can win this tournament.
Purple's still in with a good shot, I have to agree. And to be fair to him as well, he's got pretty unlucky with his lineups going against an opponent who didn't have Warlock just now when he's targeting it so heavily. So maybe he'll have a slightly easier time from here on in.
Kranich in a good spot, and I don't want to play Kranich if he's in a good spot against me lineup-wise. He's really good at aggro metas. He's really good at Hearthstone, but aggro is his absolute forte. This is a great position for him to be in.
It is indeed. The aggro decks for him... I'm still, as I said, I'm unconvinced if they're actually that good, but he's found the weak spot in the current meta of what his opponents are bringing, and if anyone's going to be bringing these aggressive decks, it's going to be him or Zixo.
I think that Kranich is very slight underdog in this particular matchup, and that is because he has Sonya in his deck.
Right.
Sonya is a great card, and the debate will go on as to whether it should be in this deck or not, but in the mirror match, it is definitely a win more card, because if you're steamrolling your opponent anyway, you don't need her, and if you're not, it's a 2-2 for 3.
Yeah, exactly. Then you have nothing on the board. There are obviously the great moments. I believe I played Keleseth 7 times against a priest once, which was probably the single best moment of my life.
Did you win?
I thought you might have with an 8-8 patches. Who truly be in charge. But this is also pretty disgusting for Kranich. Even just getting out the Keleseth without Shadow Steps, just one Keleseth, let alone 7, will typically get the job done.
Yeah, one more than your opponent is usually a good way to go. It means you haven't wasted too many resources shadow stepping, but all your trades are very favourable, which is sometimes better than, like I say, double shadow stepping, where you get some great trades, but it's still only the same result a lot of the time.
And Creeper here slightly late to the party, not getting the activation or the 2-mana reduction of both minions that have died so far, but will still very likely be playable around turns 4 or 5 for a very low mana cost indeed.
We saw Pavel playing Rogue Mirrors either earlier today or yesterday, where he's really took his time with bone mares and stuff. Like, he's quite happy to go a long way behind in the mirror and then tempo his way back into it. I mean, he hasn't got a choice here. He was a long way behind because of Keleseth. But we might see him, as this game progresses, just take his time if he gets the chance to keep the board without dying, of course.
Yes, and I did, you said he was hesitant with his Bone Mares. Earlier on, I disagreed with him. I'm not sure if it's me overvaluing how good Bone Mare on 6 is, because he could have got it out with a coin, or him undervaluing it. But very different lines of play we were considering taking, and obviously it worked out for him in the end, but it was pretty close.
Now, Kranich's main decision here is whether to waste a turn daggering. I say waste like that because I just mean slow down the game, or whether to keep occupying the board with minions. He's going to get this creeper down by the look of things, though.
So you can get a 5-5 versus a 3-3 in the SI, but at the same time, the SA, you do kind of want to hit the battle cry on it.
But also you want the creeper to cost 0.
Yeah.
If it's going for tempo, the cheaper the creeper.
I suppose the cheaper the creeper be better, but a 6-6 creeper I think probably does swing it in favour of the creeper because it's the turn before. Valspine can come down. The Spellbreaker here has to just come down for the stats. I think it's very weak indeed.
Yeah, I don't think Pavel particularly needed to silence the creeper. It's just the only available target. And now Kranich's play is going to be tempo-tastic.
You reckon he's making a big ol' Edwin here?
That's an interesting proposition.
What were you considering?
I just backstab SI.
Okay.
Or backstab dagger. I just want to make stuff, right?
I guess actually at any point later on in the game, Edwin can come down at a very respectable size, even especially because of Razor Petal Volley. Like on turns 6 or 7, that can just be played all in one go for a huge amount of Edwin buff all in one turn.
And Edwin's not actually that great in the mirror, oddly enough, because it does die, because Vilespine hangs around for Bone Mare, and if you make a huge Edwin, then it just takes the precedence over the Bone Mare, but you probably haven't got Bone Mare because you played all your cheap stuff to make the big Edwin. So
I mean, it's really, really good at the start of the game. If you can get it out on turn 2 or 3.
If you got counter coin type stuff,
exactly.
then you just win.
Then it's just true nonsense. But yeah, in this instance, getting it down around turn 6 or 7 seems just as good, because either way, he locks down board control.
It's just about who's got the most things. It's a really boring way of putting it, but as long as you've got some things and your opponent hasn't got any things, you're winning.
I think you've just described tempo. Has Neil, like the beginning of Space Odyssey, the monkeys discovering tools, Neil has just discovered what tempo is.
It's things.
It's more things than your opponent.
At least I got the reference for once.
For once. And it's... Pavel is starting to swing it back in his favour. Taking the nice trades here, he is going very low on health because Kranich has had the privilege to go aggressive because of his early board dominance. But Pavel is starting to fight back. A cheap card could activate Valspine. The Swarmer here, allowing him a guaranteed target for Bone Mare.
Right.
It's kind of a big deal.
And that's something that's happened by taking out Shaku in recent times. You no longer have those guaranteed targets. I won't be surprised if Rogue evolves a point where a stealth minion finds its way back in.
Okay.
Someone's going to identify which stealth minion that needs to be and stuff it back in and start getting these guaranteed Bone Mares because they're so huge.
But now for Pavel, the only choice he could possibly consider is the Bone Mare. And now with lethal available on board for Kranich, or in hand at the very least, it is going to be game number 2 going to Kranich as well.
He's doing quite well, isn't he?
He's doing a pretty bang-up job, I would say. These tempo matchups, he just has got it down. The Keleseth at the start obviously helped him out a great deal. And for Pavel, it just wasn't there. The double Spellbreaker tech, again, another player predicting way more Warlock to be played than in fact actuated, because they're playing a 4-mana 4-3. Even silencing the Keleseth buff was just nowhere near enough to pull him back.
Don't think Kranich is as far in front as he looks, though. This Hunter deck has got to take on the Priest and the Rogue.
Okay.
It's not great in those two. And I think that Pavel will delay the Druid as long as possible and hope that he doesn't have to play it. He does have to play it, but he might be hoping he doesn't have to, because that matchup's not going to be pretty, I don't think.
Not indeed. The Spiteful Summoner, again, just going to be too strong, I believe, for the Druid to deal with. But as for the Rogue, I think it's got a very good chance of just locking out the early game against the Hunter, which, because of the fact there's no kill commands in the deck, the only spell being Call of the Wild to activate Spiteful Summoner so consistently, Pavel has a very good chance of locking down the early game and then not being afraid of burst at all. So he can just take the game a little bit later on, take in the value trades, and then push his opponent out of the game.
And we always have to mention this about Pavel, but most of his big wins, including World Championship stuff, has come on the back of reverse sweeps and massive comebacks. So if anyone's going to come back from 2-0, it's probably Pavel.
I would agree. And I think the Hunter deck is maybe the weakest deck in Kranich's lineup.
It definitely is against Pavel, at least.
Yeah, the cards in the early game are just not quite strong enough compared to what the other decks are trying to do. Because for the Priest, obviously, Duskbreaker, kind of in its own right, if you draw it, wins the early game. And for the Paladin, obviously, there's the Murlocs. But for the Hunter, it's significantly less impressive.
Pavel is predictably, for Pavel indeed, going for the easiest matchup first, trying to get that 2-2 scoreline on the board.
It's just a matter of pride at this point. You can't lose 2 games with Rogue in a row.
Yeah, that's true.
Or 3 even.
I mean, some players like to get it over with if they're going to lose and then try and save their energy. It doesn't matter, it's just personal preference, but Pavel was always going to be the guy to try and get the 2-2 on the board.
So here for Kranich, he didn't throw down the deckhand on turn 1. Do you think he's just too afraid of Coin Dagger, or should he have gone a bit more on the aggressive here?
I mean, Coin Dagger is pretty grim, I think. Is it? Yeah. I guess the Patches trade is not that fun for him either. He wants to make sure they guarantee 2 damage for the deckhand when he plays the bow.
Good point.
So it just doesn't get any damage in. And if the Rogue's stopping damage, the Rogue is winning.
I guess he is starting to fall behind and taking a bit of damage early on, but he does have the ability to catch up, because obviously weapons are inherently great at swinging back the board, and if the deckhand can be used for 3 damage with the Patches as well to take out minions, he probably has a better chance of winning the early game than if he just went for deckhand on 1.
That was interesting. He picked up one of the Eagle Horn bows to represent he was going to play that card, and then changed his mind and played the other one, so it looks like he has a 3-mana thing in his hand that he chose not to play.
The plays.
That was a thing that he definitely did on purpose.
You reckon?
Yeah, I don't know what he's representing or why he's bothering, but it's definitely a thing he's doing just to get at Pavel.
Yeah, very possibly. There's not many other 3-drops running the deck. Maybe a Bear Shark, a Captain, something like that. He was trying to bluff to his opponent.
But it was definitely a bluff. There's no reason to just suddenly change your mind and play the other one.
So now here for Kranich, obviously a great trade into the 3-3 with his weapon, and then outside of that, is he just re-equipping the bow, playing the Alley Cat? Does he now take value with Patches into the opposing Patches?
I mean, who's the aggro at this exact second? Normally the Hunter's definitely the aggro, but actually, when you've got Spiteful and Grand Archivist in your hand, you can play a longer game, right?
Yeah, he just wants the board to be clear, or not necessarily in his favour, but just clear from his opponent's side going into turn 6, because then it's going to be really difficult for the Rogue to swing back. Even if they get a Valspine Slayer, just the ability of Grand Archivist to swing it back on turn 8 will mean that Kranich does want to play it a little bit slower here.
Super greedy with his deckhand here, waiting for the perfect moment to use it as an extra 2 damage. And making sense, he's making Pavel trade away boards.
He's indeed. And as soon as it comes down and trades away, very probably on the next turn, it means there's a good chance of Spiteful Summoner and Creeper coming down on the same turn.
I mean,
maybe even just right now, actually, the Creeper.
Yeah, the Creeper's already on its way, creeping along. And this deckhand that's been safe for so long is going to... There would be no way of dealing with his Scalebane if the deckhand hadn't been held back early, right?
This has just been done so nicely from Kranich. Yes, he sacrificed some early aggression he could have thrown down. He has taken a lot of damage in the process, but he's just not really that afraid of it quite yet. He does need to be getting afraid of Leroy Shadowstep as we enter around turns 8 or something, but I think he's probably expecting to have killed his opponent by then with the Spiteful Summoner.
Yeah, just saved up for that massive tempo swing turn, saved up the deckhand exactly for this moment, knowing that when he traded it in, it was also going to be probably a worm turn, Corridor Creeper.
Yeah. And now for Pavel.
I've not seen the card many times. I'm supposed to remember what it's called.
A worm turn.
The worm has turned.
Does Pavel use the Valspine here? It's so good on this turn. Does he just need to pray that his opponent doesn't have the Summoner? Because if he goes for it right now, he pulls into a pretty decent position going into the next couple of turns.
If he Valspines, does he Shadow Step it back, or does he keep it for the tempo as well?
That's a good point. He could actually have just backstabbed Valspine and then Shadow Stepped it back to his hand.
This is also interesting. This is Pavel going for the huge Van Cleef and also factoring the Keleseth being worth the Shadow Step, which is unusual because this game's only going 2 or 3 more turns most likely, so the buffs aren't going to be relevant many times, but he figures it's fine.
I think the Keleseth bounce back is slightly relevant. I think it's more for the activator of Valspine on the following turn, but Pavel disagrees. He wants the biggest Edwin he can possibly get. 10-10 versus 8-8. I'm not sure if I necessarily agree that that's worth that much of a difference, because if Kranich just kills it off with the bow and the creeper, yeah, then all of a sudden that's so much damage pouring to face anyway.
Oh, that animation took us a while.
Another Blood of the Ancient one. Second one of today.
Does that mean he gets a 30-30 if it dies?
He wishes.
Yeah. I don't think I've had 2 in one lifetime, let alone 2 in one game.
But now for Kranich, because of Pavel's line of play, there is no ability to clear it off. So, yes, he has left himself without an activator for Valspine. But do you think it's worth it in this instance just because of the amount of damage he can push
set up
through?
lethal. Yeah, he's set up lethal.
Easy lethal being set up.
But because of the chain gang, now the Edwin is protected. Bad things might happen.
Oh, man, this is such a difficult choice for Pavel. If he keeps the Edwin alive, Bone Mare kills his opponent on the following turn, as long as there's no taunt.
Mm-hmm. But it's going into...
If he attacks into the Blood of the Ancient one to protect one of his taunts, I believe that will be lethal on the following turn. Because even though the Spiteful Summoner can't take out one of the chain gangs, the Worm will be able to take one out and be buffed up by the Houndmaster, but then the remaining chain gang can kill off the Worm, the Bone Mare, and the weapon, and the Edwin can go face.
Yeah, Kranich doesn't play Bone Mare, for those who don't know the deck, so that's not a consideration in terms of taunt. It is just a Houndmaster you're talking about. Most people will know that anyway, but just in case.
And if he makes the trade into the Worm, it ends up as lethal either way, because now there's no beast to even throw down the taunt onto the Houndmaster until that was picked up.
Yeah, playing around that taunt, but the Bear Shark can buy some more time. Activator.
That's going to do it. Pavel bringing this up 2 games to 1 now, finally getting his victory with that Rogue. This is the one we were probably expecting him to have the best chance against. Maybe the Paladin, given the power of backstab and things like that, as Pavel goes for BM lethal? No. Okay. I was trying to figure out if there was some other thing he could go for.
Well, that's his getting his own back for that Eagle Horn bow on turn 3, I think.
Very possibly. And he's putting himself in a better spot now, but as you said, this was the easiest matchup probably out of the way. If it was more of an aggressive face hunter like we saw from Tom60229, I mean, earlier today, that deck got dismantled by Kazakhstan.
Right.
It wasn't even really close. It just felt completely unfair throughout. So if it was that particular deck, it might be a slightly better matchup for Pavel. But against this deck from Kranich, there's so much dense mid-game power if the Spiteful Summoners can be hit, and especially the Grand Archivist, that the Priest might just not be able to get there.
I've got this down as about 50-50, give or take. I think the Spiteful Summoners are absolutely key. Fairly obvious, we call it a Spiteful Summoner deck for a reason, but it's going to be normal Hunter, and then if you summon it into something half decent on turn 6, so Anduin's not really happening yet, you're good. In much the same way that people were playing Bittertide Hydra until towards the end of the last meta, which is what involved when people started playing Wasps to counter Bitterhides, and everything just got a bit weird for a week or two.
Everything got a little bit silly indeed, but there's a couple of other things that help Kranich in this matchup as well. Bear Shark in particular is a card that is amazing versus Priest, because it comes down a little bit too early for most of the AoE like Dragonfire and Psychic Scream, and also just, even if it could be targeted, it's got 4 attack anyway, so it's really difficult for the Priest to deal with indeed.
Yeah, just in case you can target it.
Yeah.
You can't.
You can't. Even if you hit it with a Master Spell, you still cannot Shadow Word Pain that bad boy.
It's pretty awkward.
It is
but
indeed.
It does die to... We saw somebody keep Glimmerroot the other day just for the purpose of putting that down.
I mean, I think it's kind of for the purpose of putting that down against Bear Shark, but I know when I was playing a little bit of Kazakh's Priest with Orange in China, he just loves that card in the starting hand.
out this card in the starting hand. Raza the Chained.
It's pretty good indeed.
Good card.
But a perfect 1-2 curve is also pretty good for Kranich. Pavel is going to have to find some way of dealing with all the stuff that comes down.
Spirit Lash, Holy Smite, and Wild Pyro?
That'll do it. Yep, I think that might just about
Those
get the
cards
job
seem
done.
reasonably ideal. Here's a glimmer route to the party as well. And Kranich has also got one of the Call of the Wild in hand already. And there's the other one.
Absolutely.
So now we can start game 5. Somebody tell the players it's over.
No. You're doing this way too soon. You need to remember, Call of the Wild is actually a card. He can play this card from his hand later on. It's not just an activator for the remaining cards in his hand.
It is actually really good.
It's a really good card. Obviously, this is an awful starting hand, but it gets really bad when he draws Summoners and Archivists. As long as he can dodge those for the majority of the game, he can be in a
Kranich's chant here is that Pavel draws no card draw. That's what
Pavel
he needs
draws
to
no
happen.
cards.
Yeah, I mean, no cards at all would be great, but no Acolyte, no Northshire. If he draws any of that good stuff, this one is completely over. Like you say, just for now, a little bit premature, but also only just because a lot of his cards have just been negated by the fact that he drew that double Call of the Wild. And Pavel's starting hand is so ridiculously good.
Yep. Pavel taking it nice and slow. Didn't even think it worthy to go for the Pyromancer on the previous turn because he couldn't clear off the board without blowing up his own Pyromancer. But with this line of play, he doesn't even use the Spirit Lash, which will be really nice later on. He keeps his Pyromancer on board. A great way to get this going for him, indeed.
Yeah, and what we want to watch in terms of mechanics here, if we're going to learn something from the play of the world champion, is the way he plays into key turns. So he waited until turn 3 to clear the board, rather than maybe try and kill the stuff on turn 1, turn 2, going into Houndmaster. Now we want to see how he approaches going into turn 6, where he would be expecting a Spiteful Summoner to be awkward. Yeah. Let's just watch how he plays around various parts of the game. And the other thing for Pavel is this is going to be a difficult hand read because he's probably not expecting 2 Call of the Wilds. Maybe he thinks 1 there, but he's probably thinking one of those is Summoner or Archivist because any card that isn't played in the first few turns is probably one of those cards. And there's a chance for it to be Call of the Wild, but 2 of them is obviously very unlikely. Very much so. What's he going to get? That's actually fine. Yep, nice easy alley cap. Not bad at all, actually, just to throw down onto the board. Keep up your board control, and he's still got answers to anything that Kranich can do at this point. The Raza is just good to throw onto the board. Psychic Scream for if things get out of hand. Harrison Jones for a bow or a candle shot is fantastic as well. I've been saying all tournament that the Harrisons have been ineffective. This is one time when maybe it will be effective. Yeah. Although he's already so far in front that it won't really matter, to be fair. That's the thing. If he was really far behind, he would much rather have an ooze anyway if he was in a losing position, because then it's a bit quicker and he can start to actually catch up in terms of tempo, whereas Harrison is not a great tempo card. It's more of just a good value card. Although it's not bad. Needs something to do here. 7 mana, 5/5. 6 mana, 5/5. That's better. It's all he can really just do. Update it. The Tundra Rhino, he kind of wants to play at the turn before Call of the Wild so he can get a couple of extra charges in terms of all the minions he's summoning. Maybe then, if he can get Call into Call, he can close out the game. Yeah, look at this now. I'm looking. Coin Bump, Binding Heal. Oh, man. Go back to 30. Your opponent's got double Call of the Wild in their hand. You've drawn all your cards. You're playing Raza Priest. This is when double Call of the Wild actually starts to become good. He's obviously had an abysmal starting game. But now we maybe could start to catch up because this card is worth about 9 mana. It was just a bit overcosted. I think honestly think it's worth about 11, which is obviously silly because 11's unplayable. If mana kept going up. Okay, well, yeah, if you look at it in terms of how much the mana is actually worth, but as cards get more expensive, you're allowed more mana reduction. You are? That's fair as well, yeah. So the actual raw numbers is you have to add 1 for every card you're getting, so it goes to 11. You're right, though. You are allowed more expensive cards and more powerful because you have to account for the time they sit doing nothing in your hand, so... But then, obviously, there was a guy who had the same attitude as me working at Blizzard, and now we have to live... And now we have Ultimate Infestation. Yeah, exactly. Well, thanks. Thanks, Derek. You're welcome, mate. You sent that letter in. Hey, this card will work. Yeah, Druid is not quite good enough, thank you. Yeah, we haven't seen the last of Druid. Well, we're going to see Druid in a minute, but... Yeah, we are indeed, and it's going to be looking particularly
unpowerful, I would say, if Pavel is able to close out this game, which is looking more and more like he will be able to, because Kazakus gives him potential for AoE. Dragonfire is AoE, so he can clear up these Call of the Wilds so nicely.
Yeah, and he knows what he's going for there. He's just going for ways to do that.
Yeah.
And the AoE he wants is easier to get with a wand spell. Just doing that 2 damage, I think.
That's all he needs, you are correct. He doesn't quite manage to hit it, which is a little unfortunate.
It doesn't kill everything, but it just kills enough.
It kills enough. As long as he gets rid of the Rhino, that's the main thing for him here. As we see, Pavel is truly the greatest player to ever live. He can even summon back Cute Cat off of the potion.
Yeah, I'm going to just agree with that. That is definitely the cuter of the cats. We agree on something.
Yeah.
I think even Sottle agrees that's the cutest of the cats.
Sottle never shuts up about how he's the cutest of the cats.
Does he not?
He loves a good cat.
Well, Kranich just concedes the Call of the Wild before he actually ruins Sottle's image. It goes to 2 games apiece, and this is the game that we identified some time ago as the likely important one, and it's a tough one for Pavel. But he is strong at playing this deck, at least, so he's going to get the most out of his chances with it.
I've liked what he's done a lot so far. Against the aggressive decks we've seen so far in the tournament, he's been pretty happy to toss away the quest, so he's clearly played enough of the deck to know that your win condition, obviously in the control matchups, as we saw from him earlier today, is Malagos, Faceless, all that nonsense. But against the quicker decks, it's just ramping up to UI, playing Plague, stuff like that can push you out of range of their damage. But that was against a Face Hunter, I believe.
This is where this Spiteful deck does come into its own a little bit, because it is an aggro deck, and then it just has that extra push, and then it has another extra push when it actually plays the Call of the Wilds. So it'll be interesting to see what Pavel does, and it'll probably matter what the texture of his opening hand is as to whether he keeps or throws.
Yeah, most certainly. We saw in earlier games against a Rogue, he was very happy to keep it because it's not bad in that matchup to give you a bit of late game power. And he already had the Wild Growth, which is obviously one of the most important cards against these tempo decks, because expecting to win the early game as Druid is usually a bit optimistic. It's kind of a bit too difficult, even with the new Spellstone, in order to do that. You just want to be ramping up into your Plagues, into your Malfurion, and then you catch back up.
And I'm excited. I actually want to see what happens here. No ramp. Makes it a lot more interesting.
Not a good way to get things going, so I would be unsurprised to see Jungle Giants mulliganed, but maybe because of that late game power, he does just have to keep it to have a chance in the later stages of the game.
Does swipe target many things? It doesn't really, but it does a few. I think it's too slow. I think you've just got to get that ramp. Because you're basically playing Big Druid with a purpose, right?
Not really, actually.
No?
There's very few big minions actually in the deck. You're playing all the stuff that Big Druid kind of should, but the biggest minions by a long way are Malagos and the Forgotten King. So outside of that, what you're actually doing is just, there's not many threats to throw down.
Combo decks and their ways.
But here we do see the quest mulliganed for Pavel. Gives him that Wild Growth, which is going to be so important to get up to that Plague as quickly as possible. Because while Kranich has a super explosive start, even with a Corridor Creeper to complement all these small minions, that Plague, for Pavel's sake, hopefully will just shut this all down.
One of the other things when you throw the quest away is these Cursed Disciples.
They're pretty bad.
They are grim when you're not getting the bonus
bad.
out of the quest buff, right?
Yeah, if you can hit them with Oaken Summons, even without the quest, they're actually not bad then. At least if you're not against a deck that has patches on board. But in a patches...
Wait, what are you playing?
Yeah, good point.
Welcome to 2014. They've got Undertaker on board instead.
Oh, no, even worse. But yeah, against a patches deck, this Cursed Disciple is doing very little indeed. So whether or not he even throws it down is another question, because he kind of doesn't want to clear stuff off the board for his Plague, but I guess he's thinking it's too far away anyway. He'll very likely throw more stuff onto the board no matter what. So this Plague should be good for me no matter what happens.
Yeah, he has to stop this somehow, and this 5-1's not getting better as the game goes on, particularly because it's never going to be on an empty board, so it's always going to die to Kranich's choice.
Pavel needs to be pretty careful as well about not being too obvious and telegraphing his plays too much, because if he's very obviously leaving minions on the board, Kranich will very clearly know that Plague is in hand and stop playing his small minions. which would be great for Kranich and awful for Pavel. Whereas if Pavel gives no kind of hints to his opponent that it's there, maybe it can get just enough value, get that 1 or 2 extra scarabs to push him into his late game.
Yeah, this is why when people talk about the best mathematical play and all this stuff, sometimes they're wrong.
Right.
Because you can't always just give your opponent the exact information from the best play, because then they'd be able to play around you pretty easily in a lot of games.
Yeah. So on this turn, yeah, it just has to be open summons. Nourish is too slow. You're not ramping towards anything quite yet. So why do you need the ramp right now? You can do it on one of the following turns, maybe even get a Jade Blossom to throw in with the excess mana you'll have left over afterwards. And here, the Cursed Disciple's actually pretty good on the board.
Yeah, this Houndmaster's going to make life interesting.
We could also, however, have seen a Faceless Manipulator on the Creeper, which was an interesting line to take, but even though the Mole is there to trade into the Cursed Disciple, there's just the same things that go wrong for this go wrong for Faceless.
Right.
Because if the Houndmaster comes down, you're way behind on board. Razormaw into Divine Shield, plus health, +1/+1, all those kind of things, you still get messed up really bad.
Sort of getting messed up pretty bad. That's 7 more, 8 more.
Wow.
Double Faceless.
So the 2 plays here for Pavel are copy the 7/7, or he can attack in and then... Actually, Spreading Plague doesn't even... He doesn't even get another guy if he attacks in, so he's only going to be getting 2 Scarabs.
Yep.
What to do?
What do you like, Neil?
I think Kranich might win.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
I think you've got a Spreading Plague. I don't think it gets any better for you. If you wait any longer, you just die. But he likes the Faceless.
I mean, just looking at the raw numbers, you just get way more stats here with the 7/7. Both trade really badly, and yeah, you're right. The Razormaw here has so many fantastic adaptations. He's going for it on the Mole instead.
I thought he would go on the Creeper and try and get +3 health, or Divine Shield.
Or +1/+1. This obviously has the real high roll potential of getting that out the way for just Poisonous, and then you can attack in for 7. But I think it's just a bit more of a resilient play to go with on the Creeper there instead.
Jungle Giants.
That's pretty bad. Is it going to be Plague this turn now? It's very, very similar in terms of the board you're facing down.
Yeah, and you're facing 1 less Razormaw, I guess. So if it was right last time, I don't see how it's not right this time.
Yeah.
And
trying to think if there's anything he can draw off Nourish on this turn.
I mean, the only one thing is if he does get rid of this Faceless, then he starts running out of ways to win the game.
He can't really worry about it.
Yeah, he'll find a way to win later. If you have to hit the
Exactly.
opponent with Malygos 10 times, then so be it.
Like, it will get to the point where it's even on board and maybe just a Creeper or just the Forgotten King will win him the game. That's just survive right now. It's often you hear people players saying you need to play to win instead of playing not to lose. Here, just Pavel needs to stay alive because you can worry about the rest of the stuff later.
Yeah, you can't. If you don't play not to lose here, you just actually lose.
Exactly.
And then that's the end of everything.
Unbelievably difficult decision for Pavel here. He just does not know what to do. Goes with the Faceless again in the end. Not much really has changed, so you can definitely see his reasoning for this play.
Well, he's just changing that 1 armor instead of the Jungle Giants. That was what all of that decision was about, as it turns out.
And actually attacking in as well, because, he gives his opponent a great trade into this.
But he forces him to.
He forces him to, and also it means he can actually just get rid of this minion on the following turn to give him an extra Scarab through Plague, and a 1/5 taunt is a heck of a lot better than a 5/1 here.
It's one of those situations where when you're sat in Kranich's seat, you just try and make sure you haven't just mislethal him. It looks like you should be winning, but you definitely haven't got to win for another turn or 2.
Yeah, 8, 12, 3 damage off lethal, so Bo will finish it off on the It's only going to be 2 Scarabs standing between Pavel and imminent death and elimination from the tournament. But Ultimate Infestation, if he can bridge his way through, might just be his ticket to the finals.
Yeah, it's going to give him a plan for the next 2 turns, but can he breach the gap? I don't think he can. Well, that 1 armor he gained 2 turns ago instead of playing Jungle Giants, by the way, has taken him out of the range of the hero powers here. 3 hero powers, it would be 7, not 6 done. Needed to be done.
So here for Kranich, he's obviously starting off with the hero power. We saw from this yesterday. He makes the plays he's going to make 100% of the time, always at the start, and leaves all his thinking time to afterwards. And thinking time turns out is pretty small because this is just quite clearly the best play, puts the most stuff on board. You've seen the Plague, so Pavel has to dig for just some way to stay alive. Branching Paths can gain him 12 armor.
Yeah. Or 6 armor and kill a thing.
Yes, that's true. There could be the attack buff here. Good point. But that would leave him just dying on board. So I think... yeah, I think it's just going to have to be double armor here just to survive. Which does bridge him through to Ultimate Infestation.
Wow.
But there's still the Call of the Wild. It's basically just about whether he can survive the damage on the Call of the Wild turn.
It's just looking like too much for
because
now.
then he can follow up with the Plague. But yeah, you're right. I think it is looking like it's going to be just a tad too much, as even there are charging cats there as well.
Charging cute cats.
And that's actually going to end up being just about lethal, with the charging cats delivering the final blow to push over. Kranich is going to be heading to the finals to play against either Virtual or Purple. Pavel just not quite able to make it there, leaving the worst matchup till last, and the Quest Druid once again falls flat on its face against the aggressive decks.